He decidido romper relaciones diplomáticas y políticas con el gobierno imperialista de los Estados Unidos.
Juan Guaido has just sworn himself in as the president of Venezuela.
This is indigenous lands.
I am running for president of the United States, and I'm very excited about it.
The President of the United States indisputably intimidates and obstructs justice to prevent a witness from testifying.
The president's former attorney, Michael Cohen, postponed his upcoming appearance before the Oversight Committee, citing, quote, ongoing threats against his family from the president and Rudy Giuliani.
What is his father-in-law's name?
I don't know, but you'll find out and you'll look into it because nobody knows what's going on over there.
It's about his father-in-law. We talked about Ukrainians. His father-in-law is Ukrainian. His father-in-law has millions and millions. Of course it's not.
Roger Stone, who is President Trump's longtime political advisor, was arrested at his home in Fort Lauderdale this morning. He was indicted, it says it's on 7 counts, 1 of obstruction of justice of an official proceeding, 5 counts of false statements, and 1 count of witness tampering.
It's a big, beautiful day. I'm Barry Gordon.
And I'm Andre Coleman.
And this is NewsRap, live at 5. Well, he didn't get the cookie.
Or the jar. Didn't get a damn thing.
If you don't know what we're talking about, a couple of weeks ago, I was saying that this is really not an issue of politics. This is an issue of parenting.
That's right.
And if you have a child who wants a cookie, and the child thinks that the way to get that cookie is to stamp their feet and pound on the table and yell at the top of their lungs, don't give them the cookie.
No.
Because the next time they want a cookie, that's exactly how they're going to try to get it.
Yeah, the cookie jars are going to be in their room after a while.
He didn't get the cookie.
He didn't get anything.
I am so proud of Nancy and Chuck and the Democrats for holding firm, because it's so important to say to anybody, Democrat or Republican, that is not an acceptable tactic. You don't shut down the government and put people in pain simply in order to get what you want. And if you don't believe that people were in pain, let's run this.
We can't pay our bills. I can't provide for myself. I don't know where my next meal coming from. I'm bored. What I'm supposed to do?
Open the government now. No border, no wall.
There are some federal workers who are going to homeless shelters to get food.
Well, I know they are, and I don't really quite understand why.
It's not fair to you, but this is so much bigger than any one person.
The only thing that is necessary to pass a clean bill paying the salaries of every man and woman in the Coast Guard is for the Democratic senators to withdraw their objection. Is that correct?
That's correct. These crocodile tears that the senator from Texas is crying for first responders are too hard for me to take. They're too hard for me to take. Because when the senator from Texas shut this government down in 2013, my state was flooded. It was underwater. People were killed. People's houses were destroyed. Their small businesses were ruined forever. Which goes to my final point, how ludicrous it is that this government is shut down over a promise the President of the United States couldn't keep. And that America is not interested in having him keep. This idea that he was going to build a medieval wall across the southern border of Texas, take it from the farmers and ranchers that were there, and have the Mexicans pay for it, isn't true.
Well, we've been playing chicken with this for quite a while, and the difference is that those 800,000 federal workers who have now missed a full months of paychecks, and the pain they've been feeling, it's apparently been kind of abstract for a lot of folks in the White House and the cabinet, who don't seem to be able to empathize with their pain. But all of a sudden, this hits the business class, the upper middle class. It clogs major arteries of our travel, and that has a tendency to get folks' attention in the corridors of Washington much more, unfortunately, than folks on Main Street who are trying to figure out how to pay a mortgage.
We have reached a deal to end the shutdown and reopen the federal government.
Oh, happy day, when Donald caved. Oh, my God. I am on air. I gotta
feel
tell
like
you.
Fonzie's gonna jump over a shark.
Oh, I am so happy. I cannot describe how happy I am.
So tell me, when did you know this was over?
I knew that, well, you know what? I want to get someone else into this conversation. Okay. First of all, I want to get you guys into the conversation, so please join it by joining us on Facebook and Instagram. But I also want to get into the conversation someone who's right here with us in the studio, a professor of political science at Occidental College who has been with us before, and we're very proud to have him again. Dr. Peter Dreyer. Peter, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Yeah.
Great to have you. So when did I know?
Yeah, you go first, and then I want to hear what Peter has to say about it.
I think I knew when the two votes happened and the Democratic position got more votes in a Republican Senate than the Republican position did. And I think if you needed a clearer signal, that was about as clear as it could be. And then what I didn't know until I watched Lawrence O'Donnell was that, you know, because we heard McConnell and Schumer were getting together, what I didn't know was McConnell made the call. And the person that makes the call is the person that's giving in.
He's submitting.
So I think that's when, I mean, the president then was out there alone, and I don't think he had much of a choice of doing anything else other than his national emergency gambit, which we still may see. What do you think, Peter?
You know, the president likes to be loved, and he reads the polls.
Yeah.
And the polls showed that he was losing some of his base. And so I think I knew this was going to be over soon when the mainstream polls showed that he's lost about 10% of his popularity. Yeah.
You know, that moment for me was when when he sent a letter, being a wise ass, saying, I'm looking forward to seeing you at the speech. And she told him, you're not going to do it. And he folded then. That was the moment when I knew he had no idea. He was not politically savvy enough or smooth enough or tough enough, because usually people back down from him, to stand up to her and say, then I'm going to go over here and do my speech, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, but the shutdown's going to continue. At that point, I knew he was close to just giving it up and caving, as everybody is calling it.
Well, that's earlier.
Yeah.
When did you know, Peter?
When his polls went down.
Yeah.
But I think people should start calling him caveman.
Chris Matthews did as I was driving in.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That was his opening word. Oh. So, yeah, they're calling him caveman. Okay. And it's unbelievable. So who does he have now? He didn't get anything for his base, so that gambit was no good. So anyone who wanted the wall has got to be looking to say, well, you know, that was a big fizzle. I mean, he didn't get it. Independents, of course, are angry at him for what he did. Moderates are angry at him for what he did. Who is with him?
He's got the Nazis. And he's got the Klan.
Yeah, he's got racists. Yeah.
He's got
his base.
He's got the racist vote.
Hardcore base.
Which is what? I don't think it's 35%.
No, I think it's right now. If he were running for re-election, you know, he'd lose overwhelmingly, and I think he'd even lose the 3 states that made the difference: Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So he's losing all over the place.
Well, there was a Marquette University poll that I think today that showed that he would lose Wisconsin today.
Yeah.
But would he lose at Mondale levels?
And big.
We're talking Mondale levels?
Well, I think Trump
probably
has
Carter levels, maybe. I don't know.
I think Trump has become, well, we know he's the dumbest president in history. He could become the least popular president in history, and that would be a wonderful thing. That would be a wonderful exit interview with him.
That's the thing he probably couldn't stand the most. Is to be the least popular president.
Yeah.
Because you know what? He can always argue the intelligence issue, but he needs that approval from the people, and I think that ship is flying big time at this point. Yeah. I don't see where, to your question as to who he has, I agree with you 100%, and that's immediately what struck in my head. He has the hate mongers and the idiots. And they'll just go back to deep state on this.
Right. Well, that's a little hard. I mean, no one made him go out there.
But they're idiots already. But What he's going to have to do now is try to find a win somewhere else.
Okay, where?
He's going to have to try to find a win somewhere else. And I don't know where that is. I mean, I think he'll probably pivot to North Korea.
Yeah.
But again, the stakes are too high there. We know he's not going to get what he wants there. He's not going to get him disarmed. So he's going to have to find something he can lie about and stick to the lie and try to convince people that he's accomplished something.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only hope he probably has at this point. Because this is fast ending at this point. Even if he's in office, this is fast ending.
Yeah. Well, I agree with, is it Eric Bailey? Because I'm not seeing the full screen. But I agree with Eric.
It's up there, straight ahead.
The president should not be allowed to shut down the federal government for his own personal gain. And I'm going to go further than that. No president should be allowed to do that. And it's not personal gain, but it's a policy gain. And no president should be allowed to do that. And I think the other thing that happened this time is, we've had shutdowns before. We've talked about shutdowns before. But this time, the media really found a way to personalize what was happening. And that affected people. And then, of course, while people were being more affected by a shutdown, realizing maybe for the first time for some of them how important government was, how necessary government was. At that same time, as we showed in some of those clips, you have this let them eat cake approach by Trump. He started it. I mean, they'll make adjustments. They always do.
That's how people respond when it comes home. I mean, in Pasadena, you're about to have 1,400 people on Section 8 whose rent payments wouldn't be made in March to their landlords. And so then that landlord could have said, hey, I'm raising the rent.
The Section 8 housing.
You're now responsible for the full rent, not raising it, but you're now responsible for the full rent, or I'm leaving the program and raising everything to market value.
Absolutely.
So that could have been 1,400 families or people displaced.
That's right.
So when it comes home, I think people, they absorb it more.
Right. So Eric, I think you should run for office. I like your next comment too. You're saying since federal jobs are funded from year to year, why not fund those jobs years in advance to prevent this from happening again? And what you're talking about, I think, is something called a budget, Peter?
Yeah.
And we haven't seen one of those in a while, have we?
What's interesting about the shutdown is here in Los Angeles, the schools were shut down for a week.
That's right.
And they had a lot of popular support because they knew it was a just cause. Mm-hmm. But Trump never made the case.
That's a good point.
That it was a just cause for closing down.
Very good point.
If you have to close down the government, it should be because of some disaster, of some overriding concern. And for him, it was just personal pique and revenge.
Well, he tried to make the case. There were rapists, there were drugs coming over, there were things pouring over.
I'm going to make
3 people got killed,
I'm gonna make
so
another
you have
argument.
to close down the entire border. I mean, that was his argument.
See, I'm going to make another argument that people haven't been considering. I think he needed the fight more than he needed the wall. And I think that's why he didn't ask for it when he had a full Congress. Because Donald Trump needs a boogeyman to ignite his base.
But if you're going to do that, you have to win the fight.
Of course. But that's
or
what
at least look like you're winning the fight.
But that's what he did not anticipate. He didn't anticipate that I've got to be able to throw punches and win the fight.
Yeah.
He just wanted to put a boogeyman out there and toss the rape out there. And today it was 4 women that had been tossed in trucks or something. And they brought him into the country, whatever the hell he was talking about. But if you cannot win the fight, then the boogeyman goes away.
Well, I also think that there was another tell last night, which was when he came out and was asked questions and came up with this prorated system idea.
What was that?
I don't know, which was kind of ridiculous.
Like returning a battery core after you buy the new one.
Yeah, I don't. So he came up with this prorated thing. But he kept mentioning Democrats first. He would keep saying, and I'll talk with the Democrats and Republicans. He kept doing that. Yeah. And I have a feeling now he's going to try to find some kind of win working with Pelosi. I tend to think it might be infrastructure. It might be some fix on health care that he can take credit for. Because he needs a win that's going to broaden his base, not narrow it more than this did, because this now shrunk his base. So now what does he do? He has to increase it. And And if he has any brains at all, and that, of course, is questionable, he's going to have to do something about it. So I wanted to also segue off of what Peter just said, and congratulations to UTLA for waging a really great strike and getting some winning stuff. Getting some good stuff. What was the biggest win out of the strike, Peter?
I think that they had popular support among the parents. Because if the school board, if the superintendent, Buettner, if you could divide the parents and the teachers, then the teachers, even if they won a better contract, it wouldn't have any lasting effect. But this was the beginning of something much bigger. And Buettner is now kind of like Trump. He's kind of like has to twiddle his thumbs and figure out, what am I going to do now?
Yeah. So do you think now the board is committed to voting on a resolution to cap charter schools, right?
Only if Jackie Goldberg wins the election for the empty seat.
Okay.
And if she wins that election, the seat that Ref Rodriguez had, who is...
well, I mean, they have to take the vote, right?
Yeah. Okay,
that's part of the deal.
Right now, they don't have enough people on the board.
Okay.
So it would be an even vote. But if Jackie Goldberg gets elected, the progressive former city councilwoman or former school board member, then there'll be a majority anti-charter.
Okay. Well, speaking of the strike, we have a little bit of footage.
Los Angeles teachers headed back to school this week, putting an end to the 9-day strike. United Teachers of Los Angeles say a vast majority of teachers have approved the deal. The new agreement with the district includes a 6% raise, a gradual decrease in class sizes over the next few years, and more counselors, librarians, and nurses. The grand reopening of Robinson Park Recreation Center takes place this weekend, Saturday 26, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The event begins with a ribbon cutting, followed by guided tours and free class demos.
So this week, this report came out. It's called Pasadena's Tale of Two Cities. And it was written by Mark Meyer and our guests, Peter Dreyer. And did you get together specifically because your last names rhymed? It's the Dreyer-Meyer report. Yes. So, but it is, and I'm assuming Mark is also a professor at.
Mark is an economist at Glendale Community College.
Great.
Where did that run? What paper did that run in?
That ran in your paper, my friend.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that ran in the Pasadena Weekly. So,
gotta keep the home fire.
So, Peter, if in the time that we have, which is about 10 minutes, but we'll keep you on for Facebook, so we'll keep it going a little bit. What's the takeaway?
Pasadena is an incredibly prosperous city. It's a very wealthy city, but that wealth isn't very widely shared. In fact, Pasadena is the second most unequal city in California.
What's the first?
And it's San Francisco.
Oh.
And so Pasadena has a reputation for being a well-planned city and having all these world-class institutions. But the people that make the city run, the people who attract the tourists and the hotels, that clean the beds, and that sweep the floors, and the janitors, and the waitresses, and the people that work in the stores, they're making minimum wage, and minimum wage in Pasadena is $13.25 an hour, and you can't make ends meet. The city council has 3 years ago voted to raise the minimum wage to $15 by 2020. And what this report says is that a third of all the people in Pasadena that work in Pasadena make less than $15 an hour. And so this report is an indictment of the city's policies around two things. It approves luxury housing for the very wealthy, and then it does very little to help the working people lift themselves up out of poverty. And you can do something about both of those things. And so on February 11th, the city council is going to vote whether to freeze the minimum wage at what it is now, $13.25, while Los Angeles is going to go up to $15, and while Altadena is going to go up to $15 by 2020, or whether they're going to continue the progress and parallel to LA and Altadena move to $15 an hour. And the report is a way of saying that the city has to look itself in the mirror and say, What kind of city do we want to be? Do we want to be the second most unequal city in California? Or do we want to be a diverse city where people with different incomes can live in the same city, Pasadena?
Now, that was a built-in clause in that ordinance, that they would take a look at the minimum wage increase in 2019 and then look at the impact that it's had on local businesses. Do you know what kind of impact it's had?
So when they passed the ordinance, they did something that LA and LA County didn't do. They had this pause. So they've hired these two economists, a guy named Ed Leamer from USC and a guy named Michael Reich from UC Berkeley, to study whether or not raising the minimum wage already has had a negative or a positive impact. And the reports came out literally today. They're online if you go to the City Hall website. And I looked at them earlier today. And although they come to the issue from very different perspectives, one's a liberal, one's a more conservative, they both come to the same conclusion, which is wages have gone up all over the city and the economy, but there's been no impact on jobs. Jobs have not been lost. And in the restaurant industry, which is the industry that's complaining the most about the minimum wage, wages have gone up and there's been no job loss at all. And so if the Chamber of Commerce wants to claim that the minimum wages have been doing damage to the economy, they are crying wolf. And some city council members might want to hear that, but the Chamber of Commerce is on really thin ice.
So when you say they've gone up, wages have gone up to the level that we're talking about? Or?
Well, the minimum is now $13.25 if you work for a business with more than 25 employees, and it's $12 for everybody else. So wages have gone up at least to that, and some wages are going up beyond that. And partly because if people have more money to spend, particularly low-wage people, the janitors and the secretaries.
They spend it.
They spend it in. They don't go on vacation to Mexico.
They spend it where they live.
They spend it where they live in the local stores. And so, if anything, a higher minimum wage is good for business, even though the business community won't say that.
One of the points that was made in one of the reports, and I know that you probably didn't have a chance to read it cover to cover, and I kind of scanned it to myself. One of the points was they would look to see. Let me make sure I get this right. If customers were paying people who didn't live here, if people who didn't live here was getting the bump from the minimum wage, compared to people who live here getting the bump from the minimum wage, who live and work here, excuse me, and spending the money back in the community. Did you do any research into that, or were you able to look into that at all?
When they passed the minimum, Los Angeles passed its minimum wage a couple months before Pasadena did. And so I said to Paul Little, the head of the Chamber of Commerce in Pasadena, I said, you should send a letter to the head of the Chamber of Commerce or the mayor of Los Angeles and thank them for raising the minimum wage. Because a lot of those people, live in Pasadena, and they're going to make their money in Los Angeles and spend it in Pasadena. There are some people that live in Los Angeles and work in Pasadena. There are some people that live in Pasadena and work in Los Angeles. We're a regional economy. And Pasadena should be on the same wavelength and the same minimum wage length as Los Angeles, which is the biggest employer in the area, and Altadena. And so the benefits of the minimum wage are spread across the region.
Yeah. There's a comment from Bev Ashley, who actually, I think this is from your Facebook post, Peter.
Oh, okay.
Raising the minimum wage to $15 will yield a full-year, full-time income of $31,200. Is this going to actually make a difference?
Well, I don't think Bev knows what it's like to live.
Then she's saying besides eliminating jobs, but you just said that we're not eliminating jobs.
She's wrong. It's not eliminating jobs.
Right.
And, I've talked to people who've seen their income go up from $10 an hour to $13.25. And what they tell me is, I can buy shoes for my kids. I can have 3 meals a day instead of 2 meals a day. I can occasionally take my family to the movie. I can get my teeth fixed. This makes a big difference. And Bev's right. A minimum wage of $15 an hour is still slightly above poverty. If there's 2 earners in the family and they're both making the minimum wage, now they're making a little over $60,000.
Better.
That's enough to roughly pay for the rent. The typical rent in a Pasadena 2-bedroom apartment is $2,900. And so if a combined income is about $60,000, you can sort of afford that.
You know, the other thing you have to always consider too is nobody's giving money back. I mean, if they're raising you to 15, if you're at 15 and somebody says, here's 17, you're going to take the money.
Right.
And you know what? You're going to work that into your budget. You're going to work that into your lifestyle, and you're going to do what you can with that. Right. Is it a lot to make a huge difference? Maybe not, but you have a little bit more in your pocket.
It's a lot for people that are making low income.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you have nothing and you go there, it's a whole lot.
Yeah.
And I've been there. Right. It's a whole lot.
And you know, and Pasadena can afford it. We have a lot of wealthy people in Pasadena, and we have a lot of tourists. That's who spends the money, right? So this is a prosperous city, but it's a highly unequal city, and raising the minimum wage is a way of addressing part of that inequality. It's not going to solve the problem, but if we sit on our hands and do nothing, then we don't have a case for saying that Pasadena is a livable city.
Well, few things solve problems immediately, right? But you always have to move and work in the right direction.
That's right.
Todd Lawrence has a comment. We really need to understand why the state's minimum isn't enough or sufficient, or why we don't have local training needed for some of these jobs. For example, we have no local training for careers in hospitality or building maintenance and so forth.
Well,
would that help?
You know, California is a huge state. Right, it's bigger than a lot of countries, and so the cost of living is much higher in Pasadena than it is in Modesto. Right, so we have one of the highest costs of living in the state. Like I said, the average rent is $2,900 a month for a 2-bedroom. The average single-family home is almost close to $1 million. Right, so it makes sense for a city like Pasadena, which is so prosperous, to raise its minimum wage so that people can afford to live here.
So, and as an example, what would the need? So, for if somebody wanted to rent an apartment in Pasadena, what would the minimum wage need to be?
Well, it would need to be about $40 an hour.
Okay. Wow. And on that note,
Yeah.
We're going to be moving to Facebook. So thank you for joining us on again a big day. Dr. Peter Dreyer, thank you, but you're going to be staying with us. But we want to thank you very much for bringing this report and your expertise and knowledge to us. It's always wonderfully welcome. And so, I'm Barry Gordon.
I'm Andre Coleman.
And this is NewsRap.